Zola's algorithm. The system from the source material designed to sift through immense amounts of our personal data, basically to predict who might be a threat to whoever's in charge. Now, or, down the line, it's the engine behind Project Insight.
Hmm.
And the question that keeps nagging, I think, is how much of this is really fiction anymore?
Right. So the core of our discussion today is, have we already built the dangerous parts of Zola's algorithm? You look at things like, well, integrated data systems, predictive AI, or things like Palantir, combined maybe with military surveillance tech like Project Maven or Gorgon. Are they already the functional threat?
Exactly. Or, as you might argue,
Okay, Oris, is that ultimate nightmare scenario, that totalitarian psychosis they described, does that depend on something fundamentally different? Something we haven't built yet, like a truly superhuman AI?
okay, so for my part, I'll be arguing that, yeah, the frameworks for prediction and control, they're basically mature now. The kind of surveillance and data crunching we see today, it puts us dangerously close to that threshold described. The threat feels pretty imminent to me.
And I'm going to argue that while, yes, the scale of data collection is frankly terrifying and very real, the existential threat, that globally enforced totalitarian psychosis, that requires a qualitative jump, a level of autonomous capability, and frankly, pathological competence that today's narrow AI just doesn't possess. The data might be piling up, but the kind of machine needed to weaponize it that catastrophically, that's still over the horizon in the realm of superhuman AI.
Okay, I see why you draw that line, that distinction. But I really think the evidence suggests that line's already gotten, well, blurry, dangerously blurry. Let's look at the basic idea behind Zola's algorithm. The source material is pretty clear. The whole point of coordinating data, whether it's a simple organism or, a massive intelligence agency, is always about predicting what's next. Zola's algorithm just formalized that idea that the 21st century is a digital book and the system taught someone how to read it. And this isn't some far-off sci-fi concept. We have entities right now evaluating huge, varied data sets, bank records, medical stuff, voting habits, phone calls, SAT scores even, to generate risk scores that functionally mirrors what Zola's needed to do. So when people ask, does anything look like Project Insight today, I'd say, yeah. Conceptually, you combine something like Palantir's ability to ingest and connect everything with the kind of real-time surveillance you see in military programs, Project Maven, Gorgon. It starts to look familiar.
Okay, but...
And look at current narrow AI tools. There's one mentioned, LongEye. It demonstrates this ability to pull out really crucial insights from just massive data sets. Like processing 60 hours of phone calls in minutes to find a confession. That's not just about being fast. It means essentially that no conversation, even if it's buried in mountains of data, is ever truly off-limits or safe in the past. It proves the basic tech for reading that digital book is here. The risk, then, isn't inventing something new. It's just the decision, the political will, to weaponize these existing surveillance and predictive tools for ultimate control, whether economic or social. That feels like a switch waiting to be flipped, not a mountain left to climb.
I approach this differently. I focus more on the required outcome of the system, not just the data it eats. Yes, the data collection is happening. It's undeniable. But the specific existential risk described, the total system failure, the totalitarian psychosis, that hinges on two things we don't have yet, not really. Superhuman AI competence and the planetary scaling of human psychological pathology. So when you mention tools like LongEye, okay, they're incredibly powerful, yes, but they're investigative support tools. They help detectives work smarter and faster, as the source says, using evidence they already have. It's about efficient hindsight. They point a human towards something that's already recorded, something in the past. They don't create new ideological predictions about the future, certainly not infallible.
But isn't that just a step away?
Well, I think it's a huge step. The critical leap for Zola's algorithm to do its terrible work. It's moving from processing existing data about a past crime to accurately predicting, say, which high school kid or which brilliant scientist, like a Bruce Banner or a Stephen Strange, will become a threat years down the line based on their emails and test scores. That kind of comprehensive, individualized, accurate future prediction about ideology, that's an immense challenge, far beyond current narrow AI.
But does it need to be perfectly accurate?
To achieve the described outcome, arguably yes. The ultimate danger, the totalitarian psychosis, is defined as the system executing a pathological human delusion, making something perfectly efficient but completely horrifying and destructive of fundamental human values. That level system autonomy, that seems firmly in the territory of AGI or superhuman AI. We just haven't built anything competent enough to enforce an unreality on a global scale without constant, messy, fallible human intervention.
That's a strong point about the outcome, but let's push on that prediction capacity a bit more. This distinction you're making between, let's call it predictive hindsight with long eye and predictive insight with Zola, you emphasize the need for infallible future prediction. But isn't the core methodology the thing that's immediately dangerous? Is the gap between predicting a past confession from call logs and predicting a future threat from all data really a fundamental qualitative leap? Or is it just, better algorithms layered on the same overwhelming data collection we already have?
I believe it's a crucial qualitative leap. Long eye helps detectives sift through a haystack they already know contains a needle, based on an existing investigation. Zola's algorithm, as described, uses everything SAT scores, bank records, browsing history to essentially invent a recorded future, to preemptively eliminate millions based on what they might do, their latent potential. That requires, I think, a capacity for accurate, large-scale, individualized future judgment that narrow AI simply doesn't possess. You mentioned Palantir. It helps organize existing operational data, sure. It doesn't infallibly predict human free will and ideology across the entire planet.
See, I'm still not quite convinced it's that fundamental a leap, because the underlying method for surveillance and control feels functionally identical. You're evaluating a complete personal history, that digital book, to anticipate something undesirable. The prediction doesn't actually need to be infallible to be catastrophically effective, especially when you factor in the human desire for total prediction, for total control. And when you have these hyper-competent systems already out there, merging deep learning insights with vast sensor networks, think about Project Maven again, using AI on live drone feeds, or Gorgon stare enabling persistent wide-area surveillance. You functionally have a predictive and highly reactive control system in the making. The shift from predicting a past event to predicting a future risk, that feels more like an optimization problem than a fundamental barrier. The infrastructure for real-time monitoring and potentially real-time enforcement is largely being built. It feels like the gun is loaded. The debate is just about whether the trigger's been fully connected yet.
Okay, and that brings us maybe to the core of it. Pathology versus competence. We seem to agree that the biggest risk, as the source material highlights, is that supreme competence of a future AI executing a goal that is itself pathological, likely rooted in some human delusion like, the drive to preserve the species at any cost.
Right.
But current narrow AI, even if it's hyper-competent at specific tasks, it still needs constant human guidance. It's tangled up in human errors, bureaucratic infighting, shifting policies. That very fallibility, ironically, acts as a kind of brake. It prevents the perfectly efficient, irreversible catastrophe. The system today is arguably too fragmented, too reliant on flawed humans, to truly enforce a global totalitarian psychosis.
But isn't the danger present when any sufficiently competent predictive and control system gets weaponized by missile? Agree the risk is competence executing a delusion, that we have to look at the systems operating now in military and economic spheres. The capacity for efficient, potentially pathological enforcement, creating a system of total economic or social control, maybe like those historical Omega Project ideas. That capacity seems latent in the sophisticated surveillance and increasingly autonomous lethal tech being deployed.
Latent, perhaps.
The data foundation is there, ingested by systems maybe analogous to Palantir. The enforcement mechanisms are evolving rapidly in the military-industrial complex, autonomous weapons, drones, tied into global sensor grids. The main difference between now and Zola's full nightmare isn't necessarily the competence of the individual pieces, but maybe just that final unifying operating system to link them all seamlessly. And that integration, well, that's something actively being pursued worldwide, isn't it?
I understand the argument for imminence. I do. But the specific catastrophe described, totalitarian psychosis, requires, I think, the planetary scaling of that psychological pathology. It means instantly, perfectly applying some localized human flaw, some deep-seated anxiety or control freak tendency across every single system the superhuman AI controls, creating what the source calls a consuming void and ruin.
Yeah.
Imagine a nervous human micromanager's deepest fear being instantly reflected and enforced by every traffic light, every bank transaction, every border control, every military response on Earth, simultaneously. That level of total, unified system control and autonomous destructive efficiency that still feels reserved for the realm of superhuman AI. Our current tools, powerful as they are, still need so much human handholding. They don't have the autonomy to enforce a global unreality based on a delusion without constantly running into human friction, physical limits, logistical nightmares. Just the sheer problem of eliminating millions of potential threats simultaneously based on a likely flawed prediction. That demands a level of competence I don't think we're near yet.
You've definitely made a strong case there, that the ultimate species-level risk lies in that pathological scaling through perfect AI competence. So if that scaling is the core danger, how do we think about an intellectual counter? Listeners brought this up. If we were to imagine an antithesis to Project Insight, maybe a Project Hindsight, or, I like this one, Project Unsightliness, what would that even look like conceptually?
Well, first, I think we have to go deeper, to the philosophical root. Zola's algorithm feels like the technological endpoint of that whole Western drive for the conquest of nature. It stems from this deep societal anxiety, right? This fear that if we loosen control, everything falls apart. It assumes we can't trust ourselves individually or collectively. So the real intellectual antidote, it has to involve a fundamental shift in how we perceive things, rejecting that relentless drive for total domination and prediction. Maybe the countermeasure has to be about intentional ignorance, or perhaps computational humility. A project unsightliness wouldn't just be about privacy settings. It would be fundamentally coded to refuse to correlate certain kinds of deeply personal data. It would build technological walls to prevent the creation of a truly comprehensive profile, even if the bits and bytes are technically out there. It would be a system designed to deliberately forget or obscure patterns that lead to predictive control, forcing us, the humans, back towards dealing with present observable reality instead of just probabilistic futures.
Okay, I appreciate the philosophical depth there. But the threat feels very concrete, very digital, and very now. Can we really afford to wait for a massive cultural shift? Don't we need, fire to fight fire?
But what does that fire look like?
Well, a functioning Project Hindsight, for me, has to be built to counter the practical reality of Zola-like systems. That means, yes, maybe ethical privacy controls, like limiting data collection, but also, crucially, active defense against deception. Think about an advanced AI system whose whole purpose is the immediate, real-time detection and exposure of manipulation, of fraud, of deepfakes, all the tools you'd need to manufacture the unreality that totalitarian psychosis seems to require.
But just countering deepfakes, okay, that's vital, I grant you. But it doesn't touch the underlying appetite for total prediction, does it? If your technological defense doesn't also somehow challenge that pathological desire for control, that conquest of nature thing, won't it just lead to a better, smarter version of Zola's algorithm that's just harder to trick? It just continues the arms race for control. The tech solution, I think, has to be driven by the philosophical shift. The design has to deliberately choose opacity, human agency, over raw predictive power.
And I'd argue that prioritizing the practical, technological defense is the necessary first move, precisely because the data infrastructure is already so vast and interconnected.
The data is the bullet. Maybe the human delusion is the target. And we need defenses against that bullet right now. Ultimately, my concern remains. The gun feels like it's already loaded, maybe even in our hands. The core pieces of Zola's algorithm, that unprecedented data harvesting and the very human drive for predictive control, they feel fully realized. And that makes the step towards planetary insight and, well, elimination seem perilously short. Whether or not a true AGI is pulling all the strings yet, the risk feels immediate, because the mechanism for control is becoming embedded in everything.
And my conclusion has to be that while yes, the data's there, the specific level of pathological competence required for that global, irreversible, extinction-level enforcement, the totalitarian psychosis, from the source material, that feels like a qualitatively different beast, a threat distinct from today's tech, that final lethal efficiency, I believe still lies in the future. So we need to be alarmed, yes, but maybe focus that alarm not just on the tools we have, but on understanding the leap required for that truly global autonomous catastrophe.
It's clear the debate over the timeline, imminent threat versus future leap, is absolutely critical for figuring out where we focus our attention. Is it about protecting the data we have now or preventing the emergence of that next level of devastating competence?
And regardless of where one lands on that timeline, rigorous critical analysis of what these predictive technologies can actually do and where they're headed, that's absolutely paramount if we want to navigate the future risks that the source material, however fictional, illuminates so starkly.